All right, Tim, take it away.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. My name is Tim Hammond. I'm the co-founder and president of the Genital Autonomy Legal Defense and Education Fund, otherwise known as GALDEF. The GALDEF mission, for those of you who are not familiar, is to promote impact litigation by providing the resources needed for our clients to win legal cases involving medically unnecessary child genital cutting. To accomplish this, we intend to be aggressive about raising the funds necessary to help them with such cases. And you can find us on the web at GALDEF, GALDEF.org. So a few housekeeping issues before we launch into the meeting here. Since this is our first foray into offering webinars, we wanted to keep it simple. So we've disabled the audio, video, and chat features of our attendees. However, the meeting will be recorded and it will be uploaded to both our website and to our YouTube channel. This is the first of what we hope will be many informative interviews related to the changing legal landscape with regard to child genital cutting, and we're excited to be part of making that change happen. So with us today is our Vice President, Matt Goodwin, who will be assisting me in interviewing our guest, Peter Adler, who was involved, along with attorney Andrew Delaney, in a legal challenge to Medicaid funding of medically unnecessary newborn circumcision in the state of Massachusetts. Due to a family emergency, however, Andrew will be unable to join us today. So we'll just conduct the interview with Peter. And with that, Matt, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, we're happy to welcome Peter Adler here. Peter is a Massachusetts attorney who graduated with honors from Dartmouth College and Cambridge University and from Virginia Law School. He teaches international law at the University of Massachusetts and has published more than 10 law review articles about circumcision. And just this year released his book, Circumcision is a Fraud, available on Amazon. Good read. So thank you everyone who sent their questions in advance to us. We have quite a number of them. We're going to try to get through them. So let's get started with that first question. All right, real basic here, Peter. How does the Medicaid system work in terms of funding? Where does it come from and who administers it?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here. I would just start by saying that. Appreciate it, Tim, your work for GALDEF and Matt. So I'm very happy to be here. So the Medicaid system is a joint federal and state program set up under federal and state legislation. It's a program that pays for medical services needed by the indigent, people who qualify as living below the poverty line, and their children. So Medicaid has a reimbursement schedule that for different medical procedures, Medicaid pays a certain amount, and the federal government pays part and the state governments pay part. And so there are a lot of federal rules that apply that are passed by federal legislation, and then all of the federal government tells the states what legislation that they need to pass as well, so that it's a uniform system. So that's the basics. I would say when doctors perform procedures, they have to certify that they're medically necessary, and they have to give a diagnosis in order to get paid. So they submit this form to Medicaid, and then they get paid for providing the services. that is the hospitals and the doctors.
Got it. So I think the next question is kind of related to this. How much do you estimate that, how much does this cost the taxpayers of Massachusetts each year?
Yeah. Let's see. Ryan Jones is an intactivist, and he made a request to the federal government under the Freedom of Information Act. So he was able to find out how many circumcisions have been paid for by Medicaid in all the 50 states between 1999 and 2016. And he also has numbers for Massachusetts that I can summarize. I'm going to read it just so I get the numbers right. So Massachusetts has paid for 94,309 circumcisions between 1999 and 2016, or for 17 years. So that's an average of 5,500 per year. Ron Goldman believes that currently Massachusetts Medicaid pays for more than 10,000 circumcisions per year. The cost to the state has been slightly more than $61 million over 17 years, or averaging $3.6 million per year. That puts the average cost of a circumcision paid for by Medicaid at $648, and that's a low rate compared to the rate that private physicians get paid in hospitals not in the Medicaid program. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, each circumcision can cost upwards of $1,750. So I just added up the numbers for all 50 states for these 17 years. Medicaid paid for 6,260,000 circumcisions, or 368,000 per year. So it's Intact America estimates that there are more than 1 million circumcisions performed per year. I had heard before running these numbers that Medicaid pays for about 1/3 of all circumcisions, and it seems to be the case. I've come out with 368,000 per year on average during these 17 years. So the takeaway is this federal and state Medicaid program pays for 1/3 of all circumcisions.
That's a lot of money.
It's a whole lot of money. So let me just bring up this spreadsheet and go to the total cost, total amount paid and charged. The numbers that Ryan got, some of them were off by 3 zeros. So the spreadsheet added up to $36 billion paid by Medicaid over these 17 years, and that can't be true. So we've tried to adjust the numbers, but I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it's safe to say that Medicaid has paid for billions and billions of dollars in circumcisions over the years.
Crazy. All right, let's move on to the next question. So the case you were involved in, when was this launched and who brought the case?
Yeah. So let's see, as background, I wrote a law review article in 2011. I was writing an article, Is Circumcision Legal? In the course of that, it occurred to me that non-therapeutic circumcision is unnecessary. I learned that Medicaid paid for it, and then I learned that Medicaid cannot be used to pay for unnecessary medical services. So this was like an aha moment. And so in the course of writing Is It Legal?, I learned that it's not legal to use Medicaid to pay for it. And I wrote an article about that was published in 2011. That was my first Intactivist article. And then next year, I published the other article arguing that circumcision is not legal. So that was the background. And Ron Goldman is a leading psychologist and founder of Circumcision Resource Center. He's very aggrieved by the number of by circumcision at all, by how common it is in the United States. And he read the article and he decided that that would be a good opportunity to bring a lawsuit if we could find a proper plaintiff. And so I was not inclined to bring litigation, just because of the risk that we could lose, even if the law is on our side. Well, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. In other words, the risk of a miscarriage of justice. But Ron was going to bring suit anyway by himself. He said, if you don't want to help, I'll bring it myself. And my thinking was it would be almost impossible for him to be successful without a law background. And so since he was going to bring it anyway, and I believed in the case, I decided to bring it. And I should add that I didn't want to be the only lawyer, and I somehow met Andrew Delaney of New Jersey. So Andrew is a young attorney. At the time, he was 1 year out of law school, sole practitioner. He's a very a popular, busy lawyer, even though he just started out. I think he may have 80 cases now, about 3 years later. He's very articulate, terrific in oral argument, a very smart man. We're really lucky to have him as a litigator in the intactivist field. So I teamed up with him and he became co-counsel. And I think it's fair to say I did the majority of the work in terms of time, but he was quite influential with strategy and in oral argument and so on. I have very high regard for Andrew Delaney. So we brought the lawsuit on July 21 of 2020. It was the height of the pandemic when, you know, people were dying and there were no vaccines. I had to personally go downtown Boston to the sheriff to file the papers. And I remember being quite uncomfortable being, you know, in a room with other people filing papers and nowhere to go, wearing a mask and hoping I didn't get COVID. But anyway, we brought suit in Superior Court in Boston, Massachusetts. And just an interesting point is that we got a female judge, and I was thinking, well, that's good. You know, she's not a man, not circumcised. Maybe she'll be more neutral. And so we were enthusiastic about that. And then we had a hearing, and she said, well, you know, we rotate through here, and I'm moving on to other cases. And, you know, you have a new judge, and his name is, you know, Judge Gordon, and Gordon is a Jewish name. And I remember saying, oh, that's a Jewish name. He's Jewish. I don't know if we can get a fair hearing from a Jewish judge. And then the judge said, well, you're free to, you know, contest the appointment if you think he has a conflict of interest. And if so, you complain basically to the new judge and say, Judge, I think you might be biased. Or you could be, not that you would be. Well, anyway, that seemed like a really bad idea because you'd offend the judge. So you really don't have any recourse. I do want to say, I think this judge was absolutely neutral. So I don't think religion affected his ruling at all. In fact, he ruled in our favor. So.
Gotcha. So to keep on time, I'm going to jump you to the next question, Peter.
Yeah.
So this relates to the GoFundMe campaign. You can tell us a little bit more about, you know, did you and Andrew do this pro bono or discounted legal services in the case? Would have been possible without the GoFundMe assistance? And how much do you think this type of case might normally cost?
Yeah, so I'll start with the latter question. So lawyers bill say $300, $400 an hour. The top firms $1,000 an hour. So based on my 40 years of experience as a lawyer and the fact that I'm an expert in this narrow field, I could have charged $300 an hour, if money were unlimited. I spent maybe 1,000 hours on the case. Andrew must have spent 200 more hours. So if we had been paid at $300 an hour, it would have come to $360,000. So realistically, litigation can cost, easily $100,000, but can be substantially more than that if you go to trial. So obviously that was impossible. So I billed at $150 an hour, and so did Andrew. And we raised $45,000, or Ron did, which was remarkable. The support was incredible, really. He didn't try very hard, he just said, we have this case, who's in, and people kept contributing. It was wonderful. But based on my working, let's say 1,000 hours, I ended up being paid $30 an hour. So I, seriously discounted my time. So the question is, would I have taken the case free if no money had been raised? Yes. Was it useful to be paid? Yeah, it was wonderful. I think I was paid $30,000. It's really quite useful. Near the end of my career, I'm happy to make, $30,000 working on a lawsuit that I would have taken free. But it incentivizes me, and the money is needed to get other people to do this work. There aren't many lawyers who are going to go spend 1,000 hours and not get paid for it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you. Our next question. Real briefly, can you walk us through some of the major stages of this case and the outcomes of it? Now, I personally tried to keep track of it in the campaign, but I'm not a legal expert, so.
Yeah, it had twists and turns, So we filed the complaint, and let's see, I have, let me just click on this here. If I can get it to open up, maybe not. That's odd. Oh, here it is, I think. Can't get my notes to open, but anyway, I remember it well. So our argument, you wanted to know the procedure, not the arguments yet. So we filed suit under this taxpayer statute. We needed 30 taxpayers in Massachusetts, and we got them fast. And the claim was, you're spending our money as taxpayers when it's unlawful to do so. And there's a statute in Massachusetts that gives the right to sue whenever a government official is not performing a ministerial duty that he or she is required to perform. So we were saying the government is acting unlawfully by using Medicaid to pay for circumcision because it's unlawful. And so then the other side came along, moved to dismiss the lawsuit. So this Judge Gordon ruled in our favor. It was a huge victory. We thought we were in the right, and he ruled in our favor. In other words, he said you have the right to proceed with the lawsuit. But what he said was, this is a really important landmark case of first impression. I want to be sure I'm right. I'm sending it to the appeals court of Massachusetts to decide whether I was right or not. So then we had to file briefs with the appeals court. That took a huge amount of time. Then we had oral argument. We were stellar in the oral argument at Superior Court. I would say I shone in that oral argument. Andrew shone before the appeals court. I didn't distinguish myself. But the appeals court was very skeptical from the start. And they didn't like the idea that taxpayers could affect medical policy, and change what doctors do and don't do. And then we said, well, it's a legal matter. We have the right. you know, they just weren't listening. They sat there with crossed arms. There were 3 judges. One seemed to ask questions in our favor, but they never even discussed the lower court decision in our favor. So the judge had ruled in our favor and they just ignored it. You could tell they didn't want to rule in our favor, and we were not surprised when they ruled against us. So then we appealed to the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts. That's the highest court, of course, in the state, and they didn't take the case, and they didn't give a reason, and they don't have to. It's called denying certiorari, just the legal term. It basically requests to be heard, and they just say denied. They don't give a reason. That's common. They didn't single us out. And the Supreme Judicial Court doesn't take 95% of the cases.
Wow.
So we were very disappointed because they had a lot of rulings in big decisions, like the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts was the first to say that there was a constitutional right of same sex people to marry, gay people to marry. So we were hopeful, but that was the end of the case and at the end of the line. Yeah.
Yeah. So this this next question, I guess you kind of already answered here. You know, their reason for declining, it's just they provided no reason other than declining it.
That's right.
Just out of curiosity, you know, what arguments did you use in this case?
Yeah. So our argument is really straightforward. I just want to see if I can bring up the complaint here. Of course, I know it well, but the phrasing was good in the way we worded it. Let's see. No, it's not coming up. So our argument was pretty much that this case is as simple as 1, 2, 3. Taxpayers, there's a statute that gives taxpayers the right to sue when a government official is not performing an official duty. The taxpayers have a right to compel this agent to do its duty. We said we wanted to compel the Massachusetts Medicaid office to do its duty, to not pay for unnecessary circumcision surgery, and to review all the payments, which it has an obligation to do under federal and state law. And then the second part was circumcision, non-therapeutic circumcision is not medically necessary, hence we win. And the lower court agreed with us. And he said the statute gives taxpayers the right to sue when the state violates any law. And here they're violating a provision of Massachusetts law, which said that Massachusetts does not pay for unnecessary medical services. And there must be proof of medical necessity, and the state must review all payments, set up a review board to review the payments. And he said the state is not doing that, so we have the right to proceed with our lawsuit. And of course, I agree with him. I think he ruled correctly. We had the right to win. If we didn't think we could win this lawsuit, we wouldn't have brought it. It's really pretty straightforward case as a legal matter. So the other side, so what did they argue? I'll try to make it brief. So the first thing they argued is it's a covered benefit. There are Medicaid codes for circumcision. And so when doctors perform a circumcision, they bill and they use this code, a number that gives that whereby they get a right to be paid. And we said, well, that's an appeal to the authority that the existence of codes for billing, but that doesn't mean it's medically necessary. Of course, there are codes, but there are diagnoses, but the diagnoses are false. Like the code would say this is a ritual circumcision, or non-medical circumcision of a healthy boy. And we said, well, you can't pay for that. It doesn't matter that codes exist. Then they appealed to the authority of American Academy of Pediatrics. They said, it's issued these guidelines. And we said, well, the AAP doesn't even recommend circumcision. And regardless of whatever the AAP says, it's not medically necessary. So then the state argued that there could be an avalanche of lawsuits. If taxpayers could come along and challenge a medical procedure and have a procedure that's been performed for a really long time and stop doctors from performing it, there could be an avalanche of lawsuits. And we argued below, well, if there's an avalanche of lawsuits, it's because the state is not following the state law that says they won't pay for unnecessary medical services. And the judge agreed. He said if there's an avalanche of lawsuits, the state would have brought it on itself. So there's, I know I don't want to talk too long. I know everybody's time is valuable, but
Yeah, so we should probably jump to the next question just to keep moving here.
Yeah.
So, there's an argument that's sometimes thrown out there about whether or not eliminating newborn circumcision will adversely affect poor citizens and people of color.
Well, I think that argument's a non-starter. It's almost a fraudulent argument. The argument is that poor people and people of color will be worse off if they're not, if it's not lawful to circumcise them. The idea is it's bad for their health. It would discriminate them, that, the people with money would end up being healthier than these other people. But circumcision isn't good for your health at all. It's really bad for your health. So it would discriminate against them and harm them by letting Medicaid pay for circumcision. But people do believe this argument. Lawyers Weekly argued that when we filed the lawsuit. They wrote an article and they took that view, and I don't agree with that.
Yeah. All right, next one. What do you think was the biggest challenge in pursuing this case?
Well, it's challenging that it was just Andrew and me. It would have been useful to have a big firm. For example, Jonathan Lupkin is involved in the lawsuit by the Levines against American Academy of Pediatrics based on their 1989 guidelines. He's very capable and he has a lot of experience in litigation. I've been a professor since 2015 and I didn't litigate much since 1996. So it just would have been useful to have other advisors. And I did involve Jonathan toward the end to help with strategy. Just also, it was very challenging to find the time to work on this because I teach full time. I have, 3 courses. I teach 4 days a week, have to commute to the university and back. Then I have 3 litigation matters. The time crunch, it was really intense. This case just kept coming back. I just had to work more and more and more and, put in hundreds of hours that I didn't really have. It was very stressful.
So sort of on those lines, at any time before or during the case, did your team there reach out to any state politicians for support? Would that have hurt or helped the case, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we were suing the state, and the state had a lawyer. I don't think it would have done any good because the state took the view that it was going to take us on in a lawsuit and was going to keep paying for circumcision no matter what we said about it. I did previously talk to my state representative, who's a very intelligent, fine person. And what she said to me before this lawsuit, unrelated to this lawsuit, was, if you want my help, it was actually, we were trying to pass legislation banning circumcision in Massachusetts. And she said, well, if you can get a lot of doctors together to come to me and say that they want to ban it, then I'll take it forward and pursue legislation. Otherwise, I won't. So here you have the problem. The medical industry gets paid to perform circumcisions. And for the most part, doctors don't speak out against it in the United States. So I couldn't find these doctors. So I've never been able to make any progress politically. And when we put on a tremendous presentation, we being about 10 different people before the legislature trying to ban circumcision, when we had a Jewish senator who told her constituents, I will never let this get out of the committee, and she didn't. We talked and we talked and nobody listened. They were just sitting there like on their phones and writing notes, and nobody was listening. The chance of banning circumcision in Massachusetts or any other state seems to me to be zero.
Gotcha. Our next question. During and after the case, did you reach out to or were you contacted by the news media in any way?
Yeah, so we reached out to Lawyers Weekly, and I was interviewed by them, and they wrote an article. It was fairly neutral early on. And then I think when we won, we should have tried to publish an article at that time in the Globe or something, say that we won the right to proceed and so on. We didn't do that. I guess just, really busy, and plus I'm focusing more on the litigation. That might have been useful. Well, I don't think it wouldn't have changed any outcome. And then I sent an article to the Globe, and it didn't publish it, and another one to Lawyers Weekly did publish an article that I wrote urging the Supreme Judicial Court to take the case, but that didn't have any effect. I don't know. It's demoralizing. You work in circumcision and you try to get politicians on board, write articles and this and that. You're fighting such a deeply embedded cultural norm. It's kind of hard to make any progress. So I guess I'm saying we could have maybe written a couple more articles, but I don't think it would have made any difference.
Yeah, and it sounds like it was already a lot just to bring the case forward.
Yeah.
All right, next question. All right, so is this type of litigation opportunity available in others, for others in their own states?
Yeah, I want to say, by the way, these questions are really excellent. I thank the participants coming today and, listening and participating by asking these questions. So we lost in this state. Does that mean we're done for in other states? No, but it's a bit of a setback. So what if I take the positive view, we won below and that decision was correct. But if we sue in another state, they're going to say, well, the appeals court of Massachusetts threw this case out, so you should throw this case out. But we do have a very strong opinion in our favor. So the lawyers would have to argue, yeah, okay, they lost at the appeals court, but the appeals court was wrong, and you have a duty to hear the case again. So it sort of moved the ball forward in that we've learned from this, and we have all this information and all these documents we created and the arguments that we made. So could it be brought in another state? What you need, I think, is a taxpayer statute. So in the law, they say, does the plaintiff have standing to sue? Is this a proper plaintiff? People can't just go into court and sue anybody if they're unhappy about this Medicaid legislation. So Massachusetts, the laws were perfect. There was a taxpayer statute and a law saying that the state can't pay for unnecessary medical services. Easy peasy, we win. Simple as ABC. I really think it was. So we would need to find a state with a taxpayer statute that gives taxpayers the right to sue. And then it would be very useful if that state also had a law like Massachusetts regulations that said Medicaid cannot be used in Massachusetts to pay for unnecessary medical services. So we'd have to go and, look up the laws of 50 states to try to find another state with a taxpayer statute. And we'd have to research the law and see if it's favorable to us. But, there's hope. We're not done for. If we find a taxpayer statute elsewhere and favorable law, could certainly bring suit again. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did a little bit of homework here. These states do not directly pay for newborn circumcision. So there is,
yes. Very good point. I should have said
Mhm.
that I think at 1.18 states stopped paying for using Medicaid to pay for circumcision. And then I think the number went backwards to something like 15 states don't pay for it today. That's great. But the momentum has been lost. For most part, those states declined because Aubrey, somebody, and is it two people in the movement, maybe I'm visualizing him, I can't remember his name. They did a great job going to different states and arguing it's a waste of money, it's unnecessary. I don't think they even argued it's unlawful, but the momentum has been lost.
Yeah, so this next question, I think you touched on a little bit in the previous conversation, but is this outcome of this case decision negatively impacting the chances in other states?
Well, as I said, I would say slightly. We're slightly worse off because we lost at the appeals court, which is at a higher level than the Superior Court. On the other hand, we have a ruling in our favor that was very well reasoned and was correct. And so we move forward a little, backward a little.
Okay.
But there's hope. I would repeat that. We could win in another state, but it's really difficult to win circumcision cases.
So we're getting to the close of our questions here. I think we got 4 more. So what lessons did you learn from this? And what advice might you give to the average citizen wishing to pursue a similar case in their state?
Yeah, well, I guess one thing I learned, I think the legal system, we all think it's straightforward. There are laws and the courts follow the laws and the courts are right. I think this was a miscarriage of justice. I think the judges just thought circumcision was a common acceptable procedure. Maybe they thought it was good for health. I don't know what. They didn't go by the law. So I think the appeals court, was biased, got it wrong. So I learned you can't trust that you're going to get justice in America. I think it's the same with the Supreme Court of the United States. I don't think they're an honest institution anymore. So I lost some faith in the legal system. It was so stressful. I'm reluctant to take other cases like this. So if I find another state that has a taxpayer statute, somebody came and asked me to, put my name on a lawsuit and travel to Michigan and argue the case, whatever, I don't think I'd do it. So I'm just getting older. I think I would be an advisor. And so I think we need young litigators to come along who can, take the ball, the next generation, young, energetic people, all enthusiastic about this. I'm still enthusiastic and passionate, but, running out of a desire to work so hard. The average citizen, I don't think citizens could really do anything other go to the library, try to research the law. I think you need a lawyer to go find out whether a state has a taxpayer statute. So, what could an average citizen wishing to pursue a similar case? I guess they could find an intactivist lawyer, ideally, or any lawyer, and just go start ask a lawyer. But really, we need GALDEF and to have a war chest where then you could go hire lawyers to do it right. Get a lawyer to go research, all 50 states. Do they have taxpayer statutes, and can we sue in those states?
Yeah, the funding to get these cases are quite expensive, as you outlined earlier. Yeah. Next question. All right. What advice would you give to attorneys who might decide to take on such cases in the future?
Well, I guess we all know there can be a miscarriage of justice. I mean, we should have known that anyway, but this shows how difficult it is to win circumcision cases. So I think they need to be aware of that. But I think the work that we've done would be extremely helpful. The arguments are going to be the same. We have a decision in our favor, one against. So I think if other lawyers take the case, they'd want to come to Andrew and me and, learn what we know, and maybe have us as advisors. And they would just have to study our materials, but that would save them a huge amount of time. I'm saying most of the work has been done. The arguments are going to be the same. The briefs have been written. We have all the affidavits and documents, appendices. It'd be a lot easier next time around.
Yeah, don't reinvent the wheel.
Right.
All right. And what advice would you give to children's rights advocates as the next steps they should take on this issue?
So on this specific issue?
Yeah, of infant circumcision.
Oh, overall. I mean, with respect to Medicaid, what they could do is go to their state representative and have a talk and just say circumcision is really bad for health and it's not what you think. And by the way, it's unlawful to use Medicaid to pay for circumcision. Maybe give them the fraud book, because I think I show that the entire industry is a fraud. It's for benefit of the doctors and hospitals, not for children. I guess I would encourage intactivists to try to help in any way they're suited to help. You know, is it protesting, which is extremely valuable, more valuable than the law review articles. The law review articles provide the foundation for lawsuits, but that takes forever. We need to change public opinion. Yeah, I mean, I just really value the efforts of everybody that, you know, everybody makes a difference. Try to save one boy from being circumcised, talk it up, contribute if you can, find other people to contribute. Yeah, we all working together. We're fighting religion and governments, and the US government supports circumcision because Jews support circumcision. At the conference in Georgia, the Denmark rep said that Denmark was trying to ban circumcision, and the US government came along and said, don't do that. And we'll give you something to induce you not to do that. In other words, they support the Jewish view. So we're fighting just enormous, you know, I call them enemies. But we can't give up, and we're making a difference. And then I think public opinion is really turning against it. That according to Georgia and Chapin, there's something like 25–30% of people in the US are opposed to it now, as before it was never discussed. In 2010, when I wrote this article, nobody talked about circumcision. So it's been a lot of progress. I'm hopeful. It's just taking way longer than any of us would like.
Well, yeah, any progress is still progress.
Yeah,
So this
yeah,
is our last question for you. Is there anything else you'd like to say about the case before we close? Any final thoughts?
I guess I have mixed feelings. You know, we did our best. We won, then we lost. It was so demoralizing. I guess maybe the big takeaway is it would be great to have a bigger firm, just because a couple of individuals, it'd be better to have a team. There is one thing I regret about the case, that we could have begun at the Supreme Judicial Court level. In other words, we had a right to sue in Superior Court or Supreme Judicial Court. And I remember thinking about it and thinking, well, if you lose at the Supreme Judicial Court, there's nowhere to go. But if you lose at the Superior Court, you get 2 more bites at the apple. You go to the Appeals Court and then the Supreme Judicial Court. What I'm saying is, because I hadn't litigated, because I'm not at a big firm, litigated since 1996, I didn't know that you don't have a right to appeal to the Supreme Judicial Court. So I don't know what, if we had it to do over, I guess since we lost at the Appeals Court, I would have gone straight to the Supreme Judicial Court. If you had a big firm, you know, with unlimited amount of money to pay for them, although you need so much money to pay for these big firms, I don't know how we could ever raise so much money. They might ask 300,000 to take a case, you know, but yeah, maybe somebody would have said, start at the Supreme Judicial Court, but you know, we did our best.
So Tim, I'm gonna hand the presentation over to you now. Thank you, Peter.
Great. Thank you, Peter. And thank you, Matt, for walking us through those questions. It was incredibly informative for me. There are so many twists and turns about this case that I wasn't aware of. One thing caught my attention, though, Peter, when you mentioned enemies. I don't see things in terms of enemies. I do see things in terms of opponents. because people are looking after their own interests, which, you know, who can blame people for looking after their own interests? However much we may disagree with them, we have to be able to prove that their interests do not coincide with the interests of the child. So we are up against religious forces, yes, but we're, I think, much more, when it comes to Medicaid and this type of thing, we're much more up against the powerful medical institutions that govern this particular practice. And we just need to find creative ways to confront our opponents and basically destroy their arguments in a court of law. And that's one of the things that, if not the primary mission of GALDEF, is to find impact litigation and set new legal precedents that work toward protecting the child's best interests. So thank you again, Peter, for your time today and your insights on this. I'd also like to thank John Atkinson, who's our treasurer and our IT advisor, for his technical expertise in organizing this webinar today. So to everyone in attendance, I would like to encourage you to stay informed about future GALDEF events, and please visit our homepage to subscribe to email updates. And if you found this event interesting or helpful, or would like to see more of these types of webinars, please do support our work. As you can see on the screenshot here, this is our Ways to Give page. We have many diverse ways for you to help out and for you to support GALDEF. So remember, we are the Genital Autonomy Legal Defense and Education Fund, GALDEF. So thank you all for attending today, and this now ends the webinar.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you both as well, and the audience.